Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How Consultants Become Visible Experts. We're so glad that you've made it today. Today's webinar is being presented by our team here at Hinge. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Hinge, we are the leading research-based branding, marketing, and website design agency for professional services firms. So if your business is searching for a branding, marketing, or website design partner that understands what drives growth for professional services firms in your industry, then we encourage you to visit our website, hingemarketing.com, to start a conversation on how we can help you elevate the performance of your brand. We're joined in partnership today by our friends at Consulting Success. Consulting Success is the worldwide leader in coaching and training for entrepreneurial consultants. Over the past 20 years, they've helped thousands of clients from around the globe to increase their impact, earn a higher income, enjoy more freedom and flexibility, and live a lifestyle they love and are proud of. Great work that they're doing at Consulting Success, and you can learn more about their services at consultingsuccess.com. In today's webinar, we are going to be discussing the content from our recently released book, The Visible Expert Revolution: How to Turn Ordinary Experts into Thought Leaders, Rainmakers, and Industry Superstars. This book is available for purchase on Amazon and other book vendors now, and in a moment, I will use the chat feature to send you a link where you can check that out. And speaking of the book, both of today's speakers were involved in the creation of this book. Hinge's Lizz Harr as one of the book's main authors, and Michael Zipursky as one of the experts featured in the book. So let me go ahead and introduce them now. First, we are joined by Lizz Harr, an accomplished entrepreneur and executive specializing in branding and growth strategy for professional services firms. A managing partner at Hinge, she leads Hinge's business development team, helping businesses solve critical marketing and brand-related challenges. Prior to joining Hinge, Lizz co-founded a Microsoft solutions provider company and grew it into a thriving organization that became known for its expertise in CRM platforms. Lizz has co-authored several books and reports published by the Hinge Research Institute, and regularly contributes to Hinge's blog and numerous other professional services publications. And Lizz, this is another book under your belt. Congratulations on the book launch this year, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Austin, and I'm excited to be doing another webinar.
Absolutely. Lizz has been rocking and rolling with the webinars recently, and we really appreciate having her and her expertise on board. Well, we're also grateful for the opportunity to introduce Michael Zipursky, the CEO of Consulting Success. As I mentioned before, Consulting Success specializes in helping entrepreneurial consultants grow profitable, scalable, and strategic consulting businesses. Michael has advised organizations like Financial Times, Dow Jones, RBC, and helped Panasonic launch new products into the global markets. But more importantly, he says, he's helped over 850 consultants from around the world in over 75 industries add 6 and 7 figures to their annual revenues. Michael, we're really glad to have you on the webinar today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me and for the invitation.
Of course. And my name is Austin. I will be available on the other end of your chat and Q&A interface to facilitate your questions. As always in these webinars, we want to give you access to our experts here. So please send us your questions and use that Q&A feature to send us your messages and questions. And we'll handle those during the webinar or at the end of our session today. And in the chat, you'll see those links that I mentioned, including an offer from Consulting Success, where you can download their 47-page consulting blueprint. And that's going to be something that you want to keep an eye out for. So keep an eye on the chat. And if you have a message, use the Q&A feature. We are going to get started with today's webinar, actually, with a couple of poll questions, because we want to get to know who you are today and what might be bringing you to this conversation. Our topic is all about how consultants can become visible experts and increase their visibility. And here we've got 2 questions for you. Number 1, who are you? What best describes your status as an attendee in today's webinar? Are you an expert trying to grow your visibility? Are you a leader who's trying to grow the visibility of your team members? Or maybe you fall into both of those categories. Maybe you're both an expert at your firm or someone who is managing and overseeing kind of the visibility of your team and your experts. Or you could be neither, unsure why you're here, but that's okay. We put a category there for you as well. And then the second question, that is multiple choice. And we want to know what challenges limit you from increasing the visibility of either your own or the visibility of your experts here. And we've provided a kind of a range of things that you can select from. Is it cost sensitivity to new marketing initiatives? Are your experts too busy or unavailable? Can't tell you how many times we hear that one. Or do your experts just not find it important? Marketing, increasing their visibility, they're unsure if they're going to see any results from that. There's a few other things that we put there, and I'm going to leave this poll open for a couple of questions or a couple more seconds, and we'll take a look at the results. We've already got 70% participation, so go ahead and click submit on that because I'm very eager to see what the results are here, and I know Liz and Michael are as well. So I've ended the poll. Let's take a look at the results. So as far as who is on the webinar today, Liz, we've got 59% saying that they are an expert trying to grow their own visibility, or 23% both of the options that we provided. So that means almost everyone in here, today's conversation, they are interested in increasing their visibility. I don't think that surprises us, does it, Liz?
No, not at all. And I'm excited that they are joining us because I think we're just going to be walking through some very practical and tactical lessons and tips for addressing what is that second question. So I think everyone seems to be in the right spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael, when it comes to the second question we asked about the challenges from that people face in increasing their visibility, we've got a pretty even split here between some cost sensitivity to marketing initiatives, the experts just being too busy or unavailable, not knowing where to start, and also being limited by the right kind of marketing tools and infrastructure. Of those four things, Michael, I'm wondering which one stands out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on what stage you're at in your business. For people that are earlier on, they might have a certain challenge, and as you progress and establish your business, the challenges simply change. But I know that we'll be addressing many of these today in our conversation, so looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for the participation in those poll questions. It really does help us kind of understand who you are and what brought you to the table today. With that, I'm going to transition over to Liz here. And Liz and Michael, I know you've got a great conversation planned for us today.
Yes, absolutely. So we at Hinge are huge fans of Michael and what you do, what you stand for, how you coach other consultants out there. So I just can't wait to dive into this. And, you know, maybe as sort of a foundation setting comment, one of the reasons we're talking about this today is because what do consultants sell? Well, they sell expertise. They are experts, in other words. So they've got part of the equation down. The challenge really is being visible as that expert. And Michael, you have such a great story to tell that about how you started and how you ascended to that visibility. So I think maybe we can just start there. One of the things we know about you is that you have been very successful at one particular strategy, and that is using content and specifically research as sort of the foundation for so much of how you coach and how you get your expertise out there. And I remember when we were talking with you for the book, one of the things you shared is that your content did the heavy lifting for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to start there because, I mean, I was looking at those poll questions and so many people had, I mean, getting something to do the heavy lifting for you addresses timing, it addresses cost, it addresses productivity and efficiency. So great place to start. And I'm just curious, what type of content in particular have you leveraged and how did it do the heavy lifting for you?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing is there's no one way to do content. I'll put that out there because you'll hear at times somebody saying, you know, A is the best or C is the best. And that's usually what they are doing, but it doesn't mean that other things won't work. So in our own journey, you know, over the last 13, 14 years at Consulting Success, before that running multiple other consulting businesses, where we started was the written word. So it was blog posts. And for that worked extremely well for us. And if I just take a moment to explain why I think that's so valuable and so powerful, in the world that we're in today, where a typical buyer has more options than they've ever had before, one thing that they're always looking for is to identify, right, define it, kind of hence coming back to the whole part of being visible. And so how do you stand out, right, amongst all the other providers and consultants and, you know, services and so forth? Content is one of the best ways to do that. A buyer can actually learn and see firsthand, you know, how knowledgeable you are on a given topic. You can tell stories, you can insert case studies, you can essentially demonstrate your expertise, you can provide significant value. And so what that does for a buyer is it makes them feel very comfortable that you are the real deal. You know what you're talking about. You've been there before. And it makes them feel much more comfortable that you could likely help them with the challenge or problem that they are facing or to achieve the results that they want. So in our case, we start with blog posts where we started sharing examples of, you know, the ups and downs, the lessons learned of building different consulting businesses over the years. And that built up a pretty significant audience and community over time. And then we started to venture into other formats. So if you look at consultingsuccess.com today, you'll see we have our podcast, the Consulting Success Podcast, which, you know, gets about 55 to 60,000 downloads every month. We have our YouTube channel, we have books, we have articles, we do research, as you said, in terms of different studies. Although I think in that department, Hinge is definitely world class, and we have a lot to learn from what you all are doing. But we didn't try and do everything all at once. So back to some of the questions, the poll questions, you said about, you know, what is the limitation? Is it time? Is it money? It's not about trying to do everything all at once. It's about picking the one lane that you feel is a strength for you, that you feel that your ideal clients are likely to consume and pay attention to, and then leaning into that.
Okay, that last thing you said is really, really important, and I'd like to pull on that thread a little bit. So I think one of the big mistakes that people make is they just say, like, okay, what am I passionate about? I'm going to write about that on Monday, and then I'll come up with something else on Thursday, and they feel good that they're just putting something out there.
Sure.
What you're really good at is figuring out what your audience really wants to know about, what they care about, and then you seem to articulate that in a very unique way that really helps you stand above this crowded marketplace. So yeah. How did you go about figuring out what your audience wants to know about so that you could then do what you just said, get those issues down?
Yeah. So in our case, it really is about listening. You know, I think one of the traits of an exceptionally, you know, successful consultant is their ability to listen. You know, there's studies out there that show that buyers of consulting services, especially executives at that level, what they look for is how well does the person listen. They don't want just somebody coming in and talking. They want somebody who can actually really listen and understand. So we try our best to do that in all different formats. In the early days, we would think about what are the main problems that the marketplace that we want to serve has. So in this case, consultants, you know, small consulting firms, you know, independent consultants, what challenges are they facing? And then we would produce content that hopefully would be valuable and helpful for that audience. And then we would see what would happen. Would people engage? Would they comment? Based on that level of response, it would give us an indication of, is this what people want more of? So that was kind of how we started. Over time, it develops because when you've built an audience, when you've built a community, you're able to get that feedback very quickly. When we think about launching a new study or launching a new program, a workshop, we can send one email to our audience and simply ask the question of, hey, is this a problem that you have? Are you interested in learning more about this? And based on the response that we get, it essentially helps us to validate that this is worthwhile for us to move forward with or not. So again, the key is that we pay attention to what's happening in the market. Of course, we're always consuming our own information and gathering insights and data from internally at Consulting Success, but also from others. So, we pay attention, like, what is Hinge doing in your data? What's some other firms saying? And we look at all of that. And we also really take into account the conversations that we have with our clients. I mean, we're fortunate to be in a position where we have, thousands of clients that over time we've been able to really learn and listen. And so we're always taking that into consideration and thinking about how can we create more value? How can we help the community that we are truly committed to serving by providing more valuable, best practices or ideas and insights that will be helpful for them.
I think that's a great tip. Simply ask your clients what they care about, what's keeping them up at night, and then listening for how they define that. Because we talk with a lot of folks out there, and they put words into their clients' mouths, and that's where the misalignment comes.
Sure.
What would you advise for some of the folks on the webinar today? Do you need a sophisticated tool or platform to log these questions that you're asking so that the marketing team can, or maybe the CEO is the marketing person?
Yeah.
Do you have to have a sophisticated way of tracking this, or what's the best way to just be real, ask the question, log the answer somewhere so you can go back and come up with a strategy for your content?
Yeah, I mean, you're making a really important point, Liz, which is about being thoughtful and paying attention to what's working and what isn't working. So I think having a way to capture that is important. But whether you're a large business or a small business, at the the early stages of this, you don't need anything. Like you can literally use pen and paper, a spreadsheet. Your focus should not be on setting up some sophisticated software or tool to track all the different parameters and all the different kind of variables. As time goes on and you've established a lot more, call it lead flow, or there's more inquiries, or there's more traffic, or there's just a lot more, let's say, resources going towards your marketing and your content creation efforts, then of course, yes, it does become more important to pay attention to that, because you might spend a lot of time creating content on topic X only to find out that, or even maybe publishing on platform X, LinkedIn, or some industry publication, association, whatever it might be. And maybe you're even getting a lot of people coming to your website from that. But if you're actually tracking, you might find that by publishing on platform Y, it's bringing only 10% of that traffic, but you're having significantly more of that 10% becoming high paying clients. And so that's something I know Austin is really great at, paying attention to and thinking about. But at the early stages, you shouldn't be thinking about that at all. You should just solely be thinking about what are the problems, challenges, top of mind issues that your ideal clients have specifically to them, and then spending your time creating content where you're sharing your own ideas, your own insights, your opinions, stories, case studies, all that kind of stuff that would be of value and interest to your ideal clients. And when you do that, not once, but over and over again, that's where you start to, go from being off the radar to on the radar and back to the book, right? Actually becoming visible.
Yeah. That's a great point. Another thing that you alluded to, and that I noticed was also pointed out in that poll question that you asked, Austin, that second one specifically, is around just the notion of time and feeling overwhelmed and, okay, so I have a blog. What else do I do? One of the things that you're so successful at is using a particular type of content, and notably your research. And you've got all different types of content formats there. I mean, you mentioned a blog and a podcast, but you have a vast repository of different types of content. And we talk about this all the time when we speak with folks that we're coaching, and we call it repurposing. And I noticed there was a question that came in from someone on today's webinar where they were saying, I've done a piece of content, I've gotten a certain number of hits or impressions on it, but now what? How do I build a community? And what we're showing here is it doesn't have to be research in particular at the center, but the idea is out of one single piece of content, you can get multiple types of content. It can be social media posts, it can be downloads, it can be fodder for a podcast. So many different options here. And I think a lot of experts miss out on the opportunity to leverage a single type or piece, and they think in terms of everything has to be unique. So what's been your experience with this?
Yeah, I think this is I mean, you're bringing up a really important point, Liz. This is kind of like the gold that is hidden right underneath somebody's nose, right? There's opportunity right there that most people are not paying attention to. And so the default I think a lot of consultants have is I always need to be creating something new. And at times, especially when you're busy working on projects, delivering, it's you get that writer's block, or it just feels like, well, I have to make time to create something new. But I would offer and respectfully, encourage everybody to actually look at what you've done to this point in your career. And there's almost certainly going to be a significant amount of potential content that already exists. Think about a presentation that you gave in the past, right? Maybe you delivered it to an organization. Well, you could probably carve out 1 or 2 slides from that or a few and turn it into a LinkedIn carousel post. You could probably just record an audio of you talking through that presentation, or even 1 slide that now becomes audio. Like there's so many things that you can do with the content that you've created once, rather than have to always create new content. Now, over time, of course, you're going to want to create new content, and over time, it probably won't just be you that is the sole person involved in the creation and distribution of that content. But to begin, you don't need to make it more complex than it needs to be, right? I think that the value is there. The main question to ask is, will my ideal clients find this valuable? Will they find it helpful? Will they find it interesting? And you might, in the early days of the kind of content creation process, you might hesitate to put that content out there because the answer in your mind may not be clear. Like, will this actually be valuable? But the way that you find good ideas is by, in many cases, putting out bad ideas. And bad ideas don't break your career. What bad ideas simply do is they provide an opportunity to see what works and what doesn't. And I remember, Seth Godin talking about this when somebody asked him, like, how do you create and write such amazing content? He's like, well, I have just a lot of terrible ideas. But he doesn't keep the ideas to himself. He puts them out there into the world. And the fact that he's put those ideas out there over and over and over again, whether they're good or bad, and he lets the market kind of judge, has allowed him to have a lot more, successes than most people, because he's not hesitating to put that out there.
Yeah, and I remember from talking with you in the past, one of the kernels of wisdom you shared is, don't be a perfectionist. I mean, in a way, those of us in professional services, I think it's such a serious marketplace. It's a very conservative marketplace. And so, and once you create that visibility, you're kind of vulnerable to what you've put out there. So you don't want to show up as, like you said, not helpful, not useful, not differentiated. So in a way, I can really empathize with the tendency to just want it to be perfect. But I know you grappled with that and kind of came to terms with that in your own ascent to visibility. So maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the attendees list, and I see many familiar faces and clients. So they're going to say, oh, here we go again, because they've heard me say this many times before. But we're very big believers at Consulting Success on kind of the term and the phrase of imperfect action. That if you wait for something to be just right, you've certainly waited too long. And the way that you create something exceptional, it can only happen by putting out something initially that isn't exceptional, like, because you need the market feedback. You can spend all day long and planning everything out and do all the research and use ChatGPT or whatever else that you want, for as long as you want. But until you actually put something out into the world, you won't know whether it resonates, whether it works, whether people want it or don't want it. And so I think this is what separates those who struggle from those who succeed, not only in the content creation area, but just overall in business and entrepreneurship, is that if you spend too much time thinking and not enough time doing, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to succeed. You're really holding yourself back. And this is what I notice with people who have achieved higher levels of success inside of business, and even in sports and other areas of life. It's that they've reached a point where they understand that putting something out there that doesn't work or isn't a success right away is part of it. And the only way that you can actually get to those higher levels is by not holding back. It's essentially by just becoming comfortable with what some people call mistakes or failure. And the most important thing is that you just keep going, right? And I think that kind of comes back to the whole concept of the visible expert, is that the only way that you can actually get to the level where people will consider you an expert or a visible expert is by you being out there consistently. So if you have lots of great ideas, or you have lots of data or insights or whatever it is, but the world doesn't know that you exist because you're not getting yourself out there, then you're not doing, of course, yourself a favor, but you're also not doing the marketplace a favor, because they probably need your expertise. They need your help. And if you're not letting them know that you exist because you're hesitating, worried that you might make a mistake, then it's a real disservice to both them and to you.
Indeed. I love that imperfect action. I mean, I think that's really an excellent takeaway for those who answered to that first poll question. They are leaders trying to build a team of experts. What a great coaching point that they can take away.
Yeah.
Michael, as we've studied the habits of those who become visible experts, we've noticed some specific traits. And one specific behavioral trait they have is they know how to leverage other experts. They know how to align with other experts. And, I think tapping into other experts, partnering with, we're all partnering today.
Okay.
I think there's a tendency maybe to think like, am I sharing my secret sauce with a potential competitor? Am I building a competitor? You've been really good at this. I mean, you have lots and lots of successful partnerships. So could you share your thoughts on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think this really, if we boil it down to the core, it's mindset, right? You can look at a partnership as with a scarcity mindset, which means you probably won't enter into that partnership because you're worried about all the things that could go wrong and how the pie isn't big enough for everybody, and so you need to defend it. Or you can look at partnerships or strategic alliances really with an abundance mindset, which is that there's more opportunity, more business than any one firm can ever handle. And so I find it, I understand it. I'm empathetic to it, but I find it funny when small firms or independent consultants have this concern that about partnering or about putting their ideas out there that people might take it. It's, like you're one person or you're a small firm. There's a whole world out there. There's literally more opportunities than even a large firm like McKinsey can handle, right? So for anyone smaller to be concerned about, like, is there enough business? Think about how many large firms there are. Think about how many thousands or tens of thousands of people are employed. The market is massive and it's only going to continue to grow, and there's more opportunity. I think what COVID and the pandemic ushered in as well is this acceleration of organizations and businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit, all around the world that have become comfortable with tapping into talent that is global. You don't need to be in a physical office space location anymore. And so what this has done is it's opened up the market for consultants, for outside experts, again, more than ever before. So this is not the time where you want to have a scarcity mindset. This is a time that even though it might feel a little bit hard or you're uncomfortable, usually the things that make you feel uncomfortable are actually the things that help you to grow the most. And having an abundance mindset creates more opportunities. And I think the way that we look at this, Liz, and I'd love to hear, your thoughts as well, is that when you have, let's say, a group of buyers, it's only natural that group of buyers, some people will resonate more with your message, some people will resonate more with our message. And I mean this across, all partnerships. Just some people are going to resonate more with somebody else, and some people will resonate more with you. But by coming together through a partnership or through some kind of a collaboration, you're getting yourself out there in front of more people. And so that's really the name of the game, is that by becoming visible and getting in front of more people, the people that feel attracted to what you're doing and to your values and to your style and so forth, now more of those people know that you exist, which means that they can actually raise their hand and come to you. And there's nothing wrong with you introducing somebody, in your world to a potential, competitor or just really an alternative. But what's your take? How do you kind of feel about that?
Well, I'm very much aligned with what you said, not only for the reasons that you just gave, but for maybe a couple other important reasons.
Yeah.
So one is there's this psychological phenomenon called the halo effect. I mean, we didn't make it up. It's been around for a long, long time. And what it means is when you associate with something good, that reflects positively on you. So when you, as a consultant, whether you're a budding visible expert or a globally known household name, when you align with other experts and secure partnerships and you co-host different events and you co-create different types of educational content, you're creating this halo effect, because what the signal that is being sent is, hey, not only am I trying to convince you that I'm good, but these other people are standing behind my laurels as an expert. And so it just builds credibility manyfold.
Yeah.
So I just think it's important for that reason. And the other thing is, anytime you're co-creating, as long as there's alignment and the partners are actually sharing responsibilities, it does take a load off your time and your money, and actually you're getting in front of a wider audience. It's like a 2-for-1 thing. So I think it's a no-brainer. Like you, I do empathize with the reluctance to do it for the reasons you already stated, but I would encourage anyone to on the call to really think about partnership strategy as a main part of how they go to market, because it's a very efficient way to build visibility. Yeah.
Michael and Liz, I was hoping I could interject here for a minute, because I think we just got maybe our 5th or 6th question in a row around the use of LinkedIn. And so while we have some time left in the webinar, since there's so many questions coming about this, I figured maybe this would be a good time to bring up this topic. I think one of the users who summed this up really well is Miranda, who said, in the last few months, my LinkedIn posts are getting significantly less engagement and visibility. My content hasn't changed much, so I can't figure out what happened. I've seen some polls out there, people asking if this is happening for a lot of other people, and it seems like a lot of people are having the same experience. Any expertise to share on our algorithms changing, or how could people maybe revitalize, their presence on a platform like LinkedIn?
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear what your experience is, Michael. I know from our experience, we do see that I was just joking with a LinkedIn expert the other day whose job is to follow the algorithm and all the changes. And I was kind of joking with them, like, is it a flavor of the day? Just like Google's algorithm constantly changes and tells the world what to do or what not to do. And he was saying it is kind of that way, where LinkedIn is really changing, not on a daily basis, but on a very frequent basis, what kind of content the algorithm responds to, what kind of behavior. So one of the things that we learned is, it used to be, and when I say used to be, I'm talking like maybe not that long ago, within the last year, where the rule of thumb was like, post as much as you can, be super active. That's, just get really active on LinkedIn multiple times a day. As long as it's educational, it's not spammy, you're good to go. Well, now the algorithm has changed, and it's actually to the point where if you do more than one post in a 24-hour period, your second post runs the risk of getting suppressed. And, that's like the opposite of what we were taught in the early days. Now, that isn't a hard and fast rule, but that's one of the things out there with the algorithm, and you kind of have to test your own and see what's going on. But it is not just as simple anymore as, if you have great content, it will get noticed. So I don't know, have you had any experience lately with testing LinkedIn and seeing what your results are?
Yeah. So what's happening with LinkedIn is really the same playbook of what's happened with every social media, kind of app or platform out there. If you think back to your early days, Facebook, or you look at Instagram, or really any of these other platforms, initially they would reward, as you said, activity. And then over time, the pull has been towards, we're not going to show your content as much. Why? Because they want you to pay, right? So that's why LinkedIn's advertising kind of component of the business continues to grow. So they're essentially throttling your content unless it meets certain kind of specifications or criteria, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But that's just a natural shift, right? Let's make this free and available for everybody. Let's make it exciting. Let's kind of get those endorphins going, suck everybody in. And then now, once they're active on the platform, if they want to continue getting great reach and distribution for their content, they should start thinking about paying for it. So this is nothing new. That said, there still are a lot of opportunities on a platform like LinkedIn. If you look at what is working, well, what's working is LinkedIn seems to really prefer, or the algorithm, I should say, it's rewarding people's posts when they get a lot of engagement on those posts. So if you think about, well, what are ways that you can get engagement? There's a lot of people right now, I should say more and more opportunity for people to do posts where essentially they ask a question and or they offer something. And then when somebody responds in the comments, then you can provide them access to whatever you're offering. That then leads to more people commenting, which leads to more people seeing it, right? And this kind of this viral nature to these posts. And these posts at times, right, can get hundreds of comments and so on and so forth. But I'll just say this, just one final kind of note on LinkedIn. And I think that it's very easy to get caught up in what I'll refer to as vanity metrics, right? You can spend a lot of time looking at, oh, I only got X number of impressions or Y number of impressions or replies or whatever. For most people on this call, you're not in a volume business. You're in a value business, meaning that it's not about how many people, it's about the right people, right? The typical consulting firm can reach their financial goals by having somewhere between, let's say, 5 and 6 to 20 clients per year, give or take. Sometimes it'll be more, sometimes less, depending on your model. But you usually don't need hundreds of clients, right? Or thousands of clients. So I just want to encourage everybody to not be kind of, pushed away or, not to step back from your engagement. There's still lots of things that you can do on a platform like LinkedIn or email or whatever it might be. I mean, LinkedIn is just one platform, but just lean into finding how can you engage with the right people. Don't worry about automation so much. Don't worry about volume. Think more value, think more personal relationships, and just try and connect with people. That's something that LinkedIn, really hasn't taken away. And I think still provides a big opportunity for those that are willing to invest the time into it. Of course, it does take time in terms of following your ideal clients, commenting on their posts, sending messages, not selling, just, supporting. That stuff takes time, but it's definitely one path that can still work.
I love that comment that you just made about interacting with others. And we've found that just being a good social media citizen is really, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do and generate goodwill. So that's why commenting on others' posts and engaging with other things that get posted, even sharing other people's content as opposed to, you don't always and only want to share your own. That is what generates that goodwill. And that does count. Maybe not through the algorithm's eyes, although I think it does in some way, shape, or form. But, like you said, don't focus so much on the vanity metrics and impressions and likes and so on, but think more about, this is the playground of professional decision makers, and the extent to which you can network there is very, very powerful.
Yep. And if I could just add maybe one more thing to that, which is back to the whole idea of, being an expert. And we're talking a lot about content today. The biggest opportunity when it comes to content is to really make sure that the content that you put out is going to be, again, of value to your ideal client. I'm not talking about length. Of course, data and things of that nature are incredibly powerful. That's actually something that can set you apart, right? Is being able to share data, metrics, things of that nature that others necessarily don't have access to. But if you're just publishing or posting something that your ideal client might look at and go like, yeah, like there's nothing really here. It's nothing really new. Then of course you're not going to be rewarded for that. But if you create something that will kind of stop your ideal clients in their tracks and they go, wow, this is exactly what I'm dealing with right now, or I never knew that, right? If you can provide that new insight, or you can be the source of detailed information, that's going to typically resonate with your ideal clients. And again, you don't just do it once and go, it's a win or a loss. You do it over and over again. and you start to see the benefits of that compounding happening. But yeah, I just think really focusing on value and what we like to talk about internally as not generalist content, but more, specialist or specialized content, where you're really creating content only with your ideal client in mind. That's a great way to separate yourself from, everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're right about we're talking a lot about content, and in a way that's sort of what gives you permission, if you will, to get in front of these decision makers. And whether it's you're invited to submit a proposal, whether it's a meeting, or whether it's the other side of the coin and you're invited as a speaker, or you're tapped for a comment in a publication or whatever. I know you are you're heavily tapped as a speaker. When I am emailing with you, you're constantly traveling, and you're often a keynote speaker, not just the guy that gets the half-hour slot on the 5th day of the conference and it's the last day. You get the keynote slots. So we talked about LinkedIn as one channel. We've talked about different types of content. One of the things we always advise for people who are trying to build visibility is think about it in a programmatic way. It's not just about one channel,
right.
or one, if you have a blog, you're visible. It doesn't work. It's a whole category of things that work together. So are there any practical tips you can share for anyone who is wanting to be the keynote, but they're just right now being asked to speak at a small local event? Should they pass up on those? Does it help with visibility? Same thing with publications. If they get tapped on one that they're like, well, my audience doesn't read that. Is it a good use of time? Do you just go for the gold? What's been your experience?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of different kind of parts or variables that we'd want to look at. And this would be, obviously a good thing to talk about for somebody's kind of specific situation. But generally, I'd say it depends on what you have going on. So let's take the consultant or firm owner who their top priority is generating more business. For somebody like that, I think getting in front of ideal clients should be the top priority. So if you already have a team, you're established, and you're just looking to increase the effectiveness or to generate more leads for your business and improve your marketing, it may not make sense to just go and talk at in front of a group that is not your ideal clients. If somebody's earlier stage and in their case, it might make a lot more sense to actually start somewhere where you're just going to get more comfortable speaking or get more comfortable writing, because now you can take that and say, I spoke here, use that to say, to reach out to the next higher level place and say, I just recently spoke here, or I wrote here. And so it's like a domino effect, right? Kind of one thing, it allows you to go to the next level and to the next level. That being said, and kind of back to my first point, I think when you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to, in the earlier days of your career or of being in business, even if you're an expert for many years, but if you're kind of earlier stage in your marketing and your business isn't as developed yet, you should probably be more open to saying yes to a lot of things, because, quote unquote, luck only happens when you're out there, right? Like nobody's lucky just sitting in their home office, not interacting with the world, right? That luck doesn't happen like that. Luck happens when you get yourself out there. So you need to create the opportunities for luck to happen. And so that the earlier stages, I think it's great to do as many of those things as you can. As you get busier and you're more in demand and you have a lot more going on, then you need to become better at saying no. And in fact, saying no becomes a lot harder, because by the nature of you becoming more visible and established and so forth, you tend to get a lot more invitations to different things. And so it's harder to say no to those things, but it's really critical, because you can't do everything, right? For every single one of us, time is our most precious asset. When you're at a more established level, you have even less time available. And so you need to be very kind of strict with, is this going to help move our values forward? Does this relate to our mission? Does this support our Q4 goals or whatever, annual goals, whatever it might be. So I think depending on where you are, hopefully that kind of frame of reference or band in terms of thinking, where are you along that line, will help people to decide what makes sense for them. But I know in my case personally, earlier on, I was doing all kinds of stuff. As time goes on, I can't say yes to everything. So I need to be a little bit more intentional and thoughtful, even though I'd like to help as many people as I possibly can. But that's also why we have other channels that scale, right? So a podcast, we can record once and it impacts thousands of people. Same with, let's say, a blog post or whatever it might be. So we try and help where we can, but in terms of something that will take your own personal time, I think that's important to really be thoughtful.
I love it. I think that's very valuable. Speaking of valuable, one of the pieces of feedback we keep receiving from readers of the book is we outlined different personas, I guess maybe is the best way to describe it, personas of expertise, or visible experts, I should say. And thank you, Austin. So we're showing them right here. Now, this isn't like a super prescriptive list where it says, in order to be a visible expert, you have to be one of these. In fact, you could be multiple of these.
Yeah.
This is just a model for understanding. You've been speaking so much today, Michael, about adding value. It's not just about putting junk out there. It's got to be valuable, intentional. It has to be relevant. And these are some of the persona types of visible experts that define the type of angle or the type of content they put out there. So I'm just curious. I don't know if you resonate with any of these or a couple, but what are you, maybe you do, and also with any of the folks that you coach, do you find that one is easier than the other in terms of building visibility?
Yeah. So actually, I remember Liz speaking with Candace for the book and having the conversation around, which of these do I resonate with? And there's definitely, as you mentioned, there's a blend. So there's not only one. I kind of see myself in more than one of these. But if I was to pick on one and say, where's the majority or which kind of connects most strongly, it would probably be the lasers. And so the reason for that is that from the early days of Consulting Success, we decided that we're going to focus on working with consultants. And so we've had many opportunities and many potential partnerships and all kinds of people that have come to us over the years and said, hey, do you work with coaches? Do you work with, fill in the blank? And for us, we've said, listen, we're going to go all in and we're not going to deviate from consulting. That is our world. That is, sure, a lot of what we do can be applied to other areas, but we define the consulting area as those that work with organizations and have expertise. And they might be working with nonprofit, they might be working with a for-profit, big or small. But if they're working with an organization and their business is the business essentially of expertise and providing value and solving problems and help people to achieve results, that's what we want to be known for. And so that's kind of singularity, or that sticking to our lane at times has been a challenge, from just like shiny objects and opportunities to grow, to add new revenue streams and all that. But we're just being very intentional and carving that out. And so if I look at that decision that we made early on today, more than a decade in, it's been a very good decision. I don't know what would have happened if we would have gone a different path. I'm not a fortune teller, all right? I can't say, but I feel confident that the decision that we made has been a good one. And then to the second part of your question, which is, where do we see a lot of consultants kind of landing inside of this? I think, again, it's a blend. Definitely, there are a lot of people who will land in that lasers. They're specialized experts in one specific area. But I know some people that on this call, when I look at some of the names, that would probably resonate more with a curator, that have these extensive networks that are kind of gathering information from different sources. Some will also fit the bridge builder. First movers to me is an interesting one, because it's, by the definition of it, it's like you're really at the cutting edge, or you're really at the forefront of something new. And so there will be some people that fall into that. But they're not always, I'd say I personally haven't found that to be as common. And then the contrarian one is a good fit for some people, but it does take the right mindset and attitude to decide that you're going to be very contrarian. and make unconventional moves, which I think we resonate with at times, because we will do things differently than a lot of people inside of the industry. But I'd say lasers is what we probably connect with most. How about you? How do you kind of feel about that, Liz?
Well, it's interesting because Hinge really was born out of a first mover mindset where we took a look at the marketplace and we said, hang on a minute, there's so many marketing and branding agencies out there, no shortage of them. And they're all talking about the B2C environment. So there's great answers, great models, great ways of doing things if you're in a B2C environment. There were not great answers for professionals and leaders and principals and founders of professional services firms on how to go to market, how to build your pipeline, how to sustain your pipeline, and really how to grow. And so we had that first mover mindset from the beginning, but I really, really resonate with what you said about that laser mentality, because that's also been very helpful to us. Just consulting's a big space. I mean, it's a very big space. And one of the very interesting findings from our data was that the earlier you specialize, the faster you have not just growth, but profitable growth. We talked to lots of experts who we said, if you could do one thing over, what would you do again? And they said, I wish I had had the courage to specialize earlier. And I think a lot of people on this call can probably really resonate with what you shared, Michael, that you knew that you couldn't go after anything and everything, and you had the discipline to say no to those who fell outside of your core client set. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have on a weekly basis where the CEOs say, we just have this fear if we don't want to cut these people out. We worried about what that'll do to our overall growth, but you're living, breathing proof of the value of having discipline around specialization.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the fear is real. And I think it's completely normal. We've seen this with so many clients over the years and experienced it ourselves. But as you just mentioned, Liz, like when you actually look at the case studies, the stories, you tend to find that the specialization or finding what makes you unique, where you creating differentiation is ultimately a critical part of success. And when you study successful companies, most at least got started or established and kind of got to a point where people would say, yeah, this is a successful firm based on having clear differentiation and real specialization, as opposed to just trying to be all things for all people. So it's hard, but I think it really is a big opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think one place where we can end the discussion is around the hard challenges of becoming a visible expert. And as we wrote the book and interviewed people like you and really studied not just who you are today and all the goodness that comes out of it, but what was your journey like? We found that there's like a lot of ways to define challenges, but they kind of focused around three distinct things. One is just being found in today's hyper crowded, hyper competitive, overly generalized sea of sameness. Some people call it sea of beige, but everybody looks alike. And how do you get found, especially when you've got finite resources? The second one is, once you're found, how do you actually develop trust? So you're on somebody's radar. How do you stay on the radar and be seen as a trusted resource? And finally, just closing the deal and avoiding always competing on price. It is a cost competitive and cost sensitive marketplace that have been dealing with for years. So how do you still close the deal, but avoid, having to give away literally every bit of your margin just to close it? So I'm just curious if you, in your journey, did you find that any one of these was more challenging than the other? And maybe in today's environment, do you see you and the clients you work with struggling with any one of these in particular?
I mean, these are all really great points, and certainly impact a lot of people. I think this is really like what's on my mind as you've been talking about these three, Liz, is that when you really execute around, building your authority and creating content and pushing to be visible, and you're doing that consistently, that really solves these three issues, right? But it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes discipline and consistency. People these days often want results tomorrow, right? And it's understandable. Like, we live in a world of instant gratification, but the reality is that most good businesses, most things that are worthwhile, do take some time. And so becoming a visible expert, becoming a recognized authority, right? Positioning yourself as a true expert in your industry, it doesn't happen quickly. Like, I can't think of one example where it just happened very quickly for somebody. It's usually the result of focused, time and effort over a period of time. But when you do that, right, it addresses these three challenges, because one, most people won't have that level of discipline and commitment to carry forward with this over a long period of time. And so when you do, right, you stand up, essentially, right, you stand out. And so now you can be found even in a very crowded marketplace, because people know you, because you're not just disappearing. And the trust is the same thing. Of course, if you meet somebody, you work together, you get a referral, that can help with trust, because you're seeing firsthand, does this person actually deliver what they said they were going to? Is it coming through somebody that I trust? But that's the benefit of content, is that if you're not yet able to have those things, where you haven't received the referral from a trusted source, or you haven't actually done work for that buyer, that company, or that organization yet, your content can help people to trust you, because you can demonstrate value in your expertise and essentially teach before even meeting that person. So they're already going to come to you feeling like you are a trusted source. But again, that requires not just one home run article or one piece. It's getting up to that plate over and over and over again. And I think closing the sale is exactly the same thing. What separates somebody who's able to earn premium fees from somebody who isn't? It's usually the level of how the market perceives their expertise. If you are a commodity consultant, where you're providing the same thing as everybody else around you, then there's no reason for the buyer to be willing or to expect to invest at a premium level. But if you are the one that is giving the talks, if you are on the podcast, if you are writing the books, if you're whatever, it doesn't have to be any one of those things, but it could be any of them or all of them. But if you're doing those things consistently, and the marketplace is recognizing you as an expert, well, that just means that they're going to expect that you're the expert. Therefore, right, experts command higher fees. And so they want to work with the best. And if you've taken the steps to position yourself as one of the best, then you'll be able to support higher pricing with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I saw a question come in that relates to what you were talking about. And Debbie's asking, given, as you've been noting, Michael, that we are in the value business, what's that balance to strike between long form content like blogs and white papers and things like that, versus what she's calling micro content like a LinkedIn post? And
yeah,
I think what you said about how you got to be proficient in each of these, and that solves the problem. And it's the same thing with content. It's not just about one type, or have more long form and less short form, or it's really who is your audience? Who are you competing with? What is your audience exposed to when they're out there? So that as you strike that balance, you think about that side of the equation, and then also think about what you were saying. How do you get found? Well, that's open form like no one's going to download something right away if they've never heard of you and they suddenly see it. That's asking too much. So longer form content, but open access, like a blog, or even shorter form, like being active on LinkedIn, that helps in the being found equation. Then you're on someone's radar. Now you got to stay there. So developing trust, that's where longer form content, like a downloadable white paper, a downloadable research guide, that's where that can help. And then finally, the closing the sale, there are things like case stories, or things that are maybe a little bit closer to how you do something, how you solve the problem versus over here where it was very broad, like, hey, we're going to educate you. So I thought that question was a great one. And it really, as I was listening to you talk about these challenges, I was thinking that really is a good model for thinking about this balance of long form versus short form too.
Totally.
Well, Austin, I know we're at the end of the call today, and we want to close out here by talking about two super important ways that you can engage with both us and with Michael. So we've been talking so much about visible experts, and we would love if you do want to learn more about, we would love if you go on our website, learn more about the book. It's also available on Amazon paperback as well as hard, so you don't have to invest in the hardback copy. But it's a great way to really get the full extent of what we're talking about here. And we also have other ways, like a course and a program that a full program that people can join. That's great for people who are leaders trying to encourage a group of experts to become more visible. So lots of ways. We would love to hear from you. If you want to learn about any of these, please let us know. And I know we have another one that we want to point to, Austin. Michael, I'll let you talk about this.
Yeah. So again, for anyone who's new to Hinge, they have amazing resources on their site, lots of great studies. So just want to reiterate what Liz said and encourage you to check it out. Yeah, so here we have the consulting blueprint available. This is a free 47-page blueprint. It's a collection of some of our most popular articles and best practices on how to land clients, how to increase your fees, win more proposals. Essentially, it's a guide to help you to grow a successful consulting business. And if you go to consultingsuccess.com/webinar, that's just a short URL that will take you directly to the page where you can go ahead and access it. But again, consultingsuccess.com/webinar, and you can get it right away.
Terrific. Well, what a conversation, man. That hour flew by. And we've gotten such great engagement here in the Q&A. Michael, if you've got a couple more minutes, we'd love to do a couple Q&A here with you
Let's do it,
before we sign off. The first question here, and I know that you actually just published an article on this, I believe. We got a question here from William, who was asking, in terms of a range of fees that consultants are charging, what range of fees do you see kind of as the most popular out there, as kind of the right strike, the range that is resonating out there the most in the marketplace? And then Liz, I know that there's a perspective here on, as you become an expert, what happens to those fees. So I wanted to bring that up as a topic because I don't think it's something we covered today.
Yeah, I mean, I can start on that. It's a kind of a loaded question. I appreciate the question, but it's a hard question to answer because there's literally so many variations of this. I mean, if we were to try and pull in and say, what is the average, where do most consultants play? It's probably going to be somewhere around the $35,000 to $150,000 range. But again, I'd be very kind of cautious in noting those numbers down, just because we have clients, some that their average project value is, $15,000 or $25,000. We have others, their average project value is $500,000, and some that are, well into the seven figures per project. So be careful in kind of taking a number and just saying, well, I guess I need to play there. What you should be focused on is, what is the value, right, that you are creating for the client? What is the outcome? And based on that, right, look at, of course, a multitude of factors in terms of your costs and, do you have a team? Do you not have a team? What goes into it? But ultimately, yeah, you want to create a scenario where there's great value for the client and a great, return for you as well. But Liz, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's funny because this whole conversation was very organic and we really didn't know where it was going to go, but I feel like everything you say gives me an excellent segue into something else. So where you said about creating value, one of the things we found in our research is a direct tie to rates that visible experts can charge versus those of just your average consultant who is an expert, but just not visible. And even in the early stage where you don't have to be like a globally known household name, you can just be known locally or regionally and have that early level of visibility. And even then, our research shows that those visible experts can command fees twice that of just the average consultant. And then, of course, a globally household known expert can command 10 to 13 times the fees of your average expert. Why? It's because the notion is that by hiring these folks, you're not just getting expertise. That old phrase, nobody got fired for bringing in IBM. And so it's the same thing. Nobody gets fired for bringing in a noted expert. So when you go beyond just being a consultant and just being an expert in something, and you're visible for that expertise, then the firms who hire you are willing to pay more, according to the research, because there are distinct perceived advantages to working with someone who has that visibility. Think of the halo effect we talked about earlier, the ability to learn more from these folks, to help with a better way of solving the problem. Lots of tangible ways that you can benefit, or that's the perception anyway, because this is all about perception. Mm-hmm. The perception is when you're hiring somebody who is visible for that expertise, you're getting manyfold back the ROI. So people are willing to pay for it.
All right. I wish we could go all day, but let's just squeeze one more in here. And I think this is a great question. It just came in. This is from Marlet, who says, Liz, how do you know what to look for about when you meet the threshold of visible? What is the threshold of visible for a visible expert? Could you talk a little bit about that and how it might be a little bit different depending on who you are, what your goals are? I know that was a big theme in the book.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. And kind of like Michael, you were talking about earlier about the importance of mindset and approaching this with an abundance mindset, and there's no limits. I think it's the same with visibility. Like, are we really ever done? I don't know that there's like a line in the sand that we can say, okay, now I've achieved it. I can be on to the next thing, because marketplaces are constantly changing. Buyer behavior is constantly changing. The competitive landscape is constantly changing. What you need as a return from your efforts is evolving and changing. So I think to be helpful here and try to answer this, I think of it less around what is the threshold and more how do I know if I'm moving the needle at all? And that's where I would kind of bucket my thinking, and I would look at some visibility metrics, like what kind of traffic is coming to my website? Is it qualified? Like you were saying, Michael, like not just volume, but quantity. Are people downloading my content? Is my LinkedIn following growing? Is my email list size growing? So I would look at those kind of visibility metrics. I would also look at impact metrics. What's going on with my sales cycle? Is it shortening? That's a sign that I'm becoming more visible. Is my average contract size growing? Are the proposals going out growing? And then, of course, am I growing, period? And is it profitable growth? So I would look at those things as a barometer of if you're moving the needle in the right direction.
I can add a few thoughts real quick on that from my perspective. And if it's the Marlet, I think, hi Marlet, great to have you. So I look at it as the tipping point. I think there's a time in every business, and especially the consulting kind of professional services world, where you feel like you've reached that tipping point, and all of a sudden the effort that it requires for you to get clients flips, and it goes from you having to spend a lot of time getting out there, reaching out to people, doing tons of follow-up. Like it just requires a lot of effort and a lot of work. But then when you reach that tipping point, you start finding that, and when you're there, because you can almost always start to see it, where people start reaching out to you. Like you start getting people contacting you, and not just once, but it kind of happens over and over. And I think everything that Liz mentioned is like the level up from what I'm talking about, like actually thinking about the buckets and being more analytical and looking for refinements and improvements. That's like that next stage. But if you want that first kind of signal, to me, that first signal is, are you starting to get contacted? When does it flip from having to be as much outbound to more inbound, and not once, but multiple times? That to me is a signal that the market is starting to recognize you, and that the effort that you've put in over time is starting to be rewarded. And the trick when this happens, because some people go, oh, I'm great, like I have my pipeline's full for a while. They take their kind of proverbial foot off the gas pedal, and they stop doing the things that got them to where they are now. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you don't maybe need to do as much outbound and follow up as you did before, but you need to keep putting your foot on the pedal and to amplify your insights, your expertise through content or whatever else it might be. But yeah, I think it's the tipping point. It's clear. I can remember when it happened in my first consulting business, although 20 years, whatever it was back. And it's a really sweet moment when it happens. Takes work, takes effort, but it's definitely worth it.
Ooh, I feel like you just uncovered part 2 of our discussion. So let's save a date. I do want to do a whole session on that. That's
Sounds
great.
good. Awesome.
Love it.
Well, given the glowing feedback we've gotten in the comments, I almost certainly imagine we will consider revisiting this conversation with Michael. Michael, thank you so much for your time today and joining Hinge in partnership for this webinar. Again, to learn more about Michael and everything Consulting Success is doing, go visit their website, consultingsuccess.com. And for those of you out there who are eager and interested in learning more about Hinge, the book, the program, the course, anything that we've got going on, you know where to find us at hingemarketing.com. On our website, we've got guides, research reports, on-demand webinars, whatever you're looking for in terms of professional services marketing. We try to provide those resources for you. Again, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on today's webinar. You can see Liz and Michael's contact information is there on the screen, so feel free to email us or connect with us on LinkedIn. And we hope that you enjoyed the session. Leave us your feedback in the survey that you're going to see here as we sign off the webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope you have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.